Honorable members, I want to disclose that the nominee was my yearmate at the University of Nairobi. The nominee and I served in the cabinet of our late President Mwai Kibaki. That, however, will not in any way impair or affect my capacity to question him on his suitability for the job for which he has been nominated. Thank you. Now, Honorable Mutahi Kagwe, in less than 5 minutes, tell this committee who you are, your background, your education, and why you think you are suitable to hold office for which you have been nominated.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the nominating committee. First and foremost, before I start, Mr. Chairman, let me just say that I want to say thank you. First, I would like to say thank you to God indeed, because that is why He is why we are here today. Secondly, I wish to take this opportunity to thank His Excellency, the President, for this appointment or nomination, which I hope will be approved by this committee. Thirdly, Mr. Chairman, I very briefly will say that, as I said, my name is Mutahi Kagwe. I was born in Nyeri County. And Mr. Chairman, if you allow, as I go along, I will give the reasons. I will tie up the reasons why I think I'm suitable for this job with my background. I went to primary school in a rural school in Nyeri, and I think that is where I started the journey to this discussion here today. Most of you will remember that in primary schools, or some of you will remember that in primary schools, we used to have what was called the 4K club. The 4K club is where we started our farming. Some of us went there. And Mr. Chairman, if you remember, the 4K clubs introduced us to agriculture. And that's why I picked my talent of planting trees and so on. Mr. Chairman, in my primary school, what we did, I lived a rural primary school life where we did a lot of work in coffee. I have carried coffee on my backside to take it to the factories. First in Ishamara, if anybody knows the place, in Nyeri. We have spent our school holidays in coffee factories where we were drying the coffee beans and so on and so forth.
You know what 4K meant?
Kuungana, kufanya, kuungana,
kuungana, kufanya, kusaidia Kenya.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's what it was.
Yeah, and I was a member of that, and you two are a member. Yeah, that's what it meant. And Mr. Chairman,
Majority Leader didn't know that.
Yeah.
I think he went to school when 4K was dead.
Probably. But it is one of the things perhaps we should think about reviving as we go along. Mr. Chairman, I then went to Kagumo High School, where I studied for 6 years. But in the course of my studies too, I was a member of the agricultural club in the school. And it is through the agricultural club in the school that we actually started eating eggs at Kagumo High School, because it is how we started the school poultry project. And I remember distinctly Mr. Gisheru, who was our teacher, leading that whole project, and just emphasizing to us the importance of agriculture at the time. But I was successful in Kagumo High School, and I went to the University of Nairobi, where, as you graciously acknowledged, Mr. Chairman, we were in school together, where I graduated with a bachelor's degree in commerce. And I want to talk about that commerce degree, Mr. Chairman, because a degree in commerce prepares you generally for business management. May it be the business in public or business in the private sector. And my education was rounded enough so that in the course of my career, as I left university, in the course of my career, I have managed very different businesses, both in public and private life. I also went on, Mr. Chairman, to do a master's degree at USIU, again in business administration, a master's in business administration, emphasizing my studies more in management information systems as well as finance. Mr. Chairman, during this time, I did my master's when I was working, but I started off my working career at an interesting small place called Mashambani Magazine. Mashambani Magazine was a magazine published by trend publishers, which was about farming. And I later, in my capacity as a marketing manager of that company, closed Mashambani Magazine and replaced it with Farmer's Voice. The Farmer's Voice magazine, which I worked for, was actually the KFA magazine. Those of you who remember, the Kenya Farmers Association is the one that owned the Farmer's Voice, which I published and ran for 2 years. So again, Mr. Speaker, that's why I said the journey that I'm going to explain has gone on to attach me to this interview here today. Of course, I would never have foreseen that this was going to happen. So, Mr. Speaker, having finished my education, I went on to run Trend Publishers, which was Viva, better known as Viva Magazine. I left Viva Magazine and joined the Standard Newspaper Group as advertising manager, followed on where I rose in the group, which was then owned by Lonro East Africa, to become the commercial operations director. Following my 11 years as an employee of Lonro, I then branched out on my own to start my own businesses. And since then, that is what I have been doing in my private life, running businesses over that period since the year 1992, when I left former employment. Mr. Chairman, after that, during my period, in the year 2002, I ran for office. I felt that having done being educated, having then gone on to develop a successful career, I felt that I should do some public work and serve the people. And I went to Mukurweini constituency, where I ran for office and was elected in 2002 as a member of parliament for Mukurweini constituency. In the course of that, you remember, Mr. Chairman, that at that time, cabinet secretaries, cabinet ministers were also appointed from the parliament, and I was appointed as the Minister for Information and Communications in the year 2005. I served as Minister for Information and Communication, and I can say that it is one of my most exciting times. And in terms of preparing me for, again, going back to the cabinet as CS for agriculture and livestock, that's where I cut my teeth in that space of understanding government, being clear about the roles that the different arms of government play, being clear about the role of cabinet, collective responsibility, and other aspects that you learn as you do these jobs. I then, in 2007, I lost my position as member of parliament, but then I was appointed by His Excellency, late President Kibaki, to be chairman of the Multimedia University Council. I was the first chairman of that university and laid the foundation of what is now perhaps a uniquely placed university in terms of the technology space and communication space. And again, I'm very proud of my work there and what we did. I then, Mr. Chairman, left.
Wind up.
I then, Mr. Chairman, went to back to Nyeri County, where I became the senator of Nyeri County followed after that by my appointment again back to the cabinet as the CS for health in 2019. And Mr. Chairman, all that experience that I have had, both my education, my experience in school, my experience in private sector, my experience as cabinet secretary and the minister for information, cabinet secretary for health, have all, in my opinion, ably prepared me for this particular position.
Thank you. I'll invite members to put questions to you, starting with the Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Mr. Mutahi Kagwe, now that you're going to be the Minister of Agriculture, we know certain challenges exist in that sector. First, Kenya is a net importer of foods that is capable of producing, like edible oil and rice and wheat. We also know the fact that the average age of a farmer is 65. Yet, our population is highly youthful. If you're approved for this appointment, what strategies will you employ to make agriculture more attractive and profitable to young people so that we can ensure that we have food security in the future? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa. Now, let me just start by the rider that you started with, which is the importance of agriculture in the country. And to say that over the years, the problem that you have alluded to, the issue of food importation, the issue of youth, has been around with us. The framework on which the current agriculture ministry is being run, or is agricultural sector transformation and growth strategy. Mr. Chairman, I want to raise this issue broadly to say the following. First, there has been a misguided notion, I think, over the years that we have all made. And that is to say that the focus, the initial focus of everything in agriculture is production. Mr. Chairman, what we must refocus on in the ASDGS is coming on for review, because it was structured in 2019 and is coming up for review after 5 years. Mr. Chairman, the only way that agriculture is going to be the kind of industry, the kind of structure, the kind of mainstay for our people that we are ever going to construct is if the farmer becomes a central consideration of everything that we do. Mr. Chairman, until and unless the farmer looks at his profit and loss statement and sees that he is making more money than he is spending, we are going to continue having issues of food security. We are going to continue having issues of underproduction of food items, as well as cash crop items, as well as livestock items. So the focus to me, and what we must begin to philosophize about, has got to be, how do we put more money in the farmer's pocket? If we ask ourselves that statement, and I want Mr. Chairman to say that I recall very distinctly that when I was appointed Cabinet Minister for Information, and I tried to figure out how to deal with the many problems that were there, we arrived at one sentence: let's take a telephone and it works. Everything else we do around us must be focused on that issue. Whether we are going to get international gateways, whether we are going to license other players in the market, it is all should be about the concept of a telephone working. Similarly, if we are going to revive agriculture, the only way we are ever going to do it is when the farmer is profitable. When the farmer is profitable, we'll have enough food. When the farmer is profitable, we'll have enough for exports and so on. But no matter how many papers we write, no matter how many debates we have, no matter how much discussion we are going to have, unless and until the farmer looks at his balance sheet and says that income equals price times quantity, we are not going to succeed. So for me, therefore, when we look at the sphere, when we look at the entire agricultural space, then things that we do should go to that. You talked about the youth. Youth today, Gen Zs, millennials, and others, are about one thing if they are going to go to business. It's about profit. It's about making money. No youth is going to go to agriculture because we are urging them to go there. They are only going to go to agriculture if they are going to make money. And the only way they are going to make money is by taking the necessary steps that we have to make in order for agriculture to be responsive to profit making. Now, Mr. Chairman, this is very broad, and therefore you allow me space just to expand a little bit. There are many activities within the agricultural sector that we have to carry forward, that we have to do. For example, just to take youth as an example. In order for us to attract the youth into agriculture, youth have no land to grow food on. A lot of the young people don't have land. So we have to think broadly about how can we afford them land first. There is a lot of land, ADC and other organizations, private sector, land that is lying idle, that is not being used, that we can lease to these people. Now, in order for us to lease land to these people, we have got to make sure that the land, that the use of the land that they are getting is going to be profitable to them. Because that's why, in the first place, they are going to go for that idea. How are you going to do that? Our research organizations must ensure that we have done proper soil analysis. Our seed people must have the correct seeds so that people can plant seeds that germinate, seeds that produce the correct product. We have got to plant the right crops in the right places so that they can grow en masse and produce more per acre. So we have got to use the technology because youth are interested in technology. And also we have to define, when we say that the youth should be involved in agriculture, which part of agriculture are we talking about? Because it is not just about growing to grow crops. For example, tourism in agriculture is being involved in agriculture. You know, you travel all over the world and you see yourself being taken to places where they grow all sorts of things in other nations. We want people to come to Kenya also to see our agriculture. That's an area that can be attractive to the youth. There is fintech and agri-finance. These are the areas that the youth are going to be interested in. So in a nutshell, Mr. Chairman, the business of agriculture has got to be looked at from a profit and loss in order for us to make it worthwhile and in order for us to revive it. Agriculture for the youth must be made cool. It is too ordinary. It's too boring. Youth are not going to go there the way it is structured today. It's got to be something more exciting that involves technology, that involves new ways of doing things, that involves areas in agriculture that we have not quite spent our time on, things like hydroponics, aquaponics. These are areas that they are going to look at. The use of technology means that they are going to introduce new things in agriculture that do not currently exist. What does that mean, therefore? It means that the training that we are going to engage in, working together with the ministries of education, we have to look at the training that we are giving the agricultural sector, the agricultural students. What are we training them in? The future of agriculture is going to be in technology. AI, for example, artificial intelligence, is going to play a very crucial role in the future of agriculture. And if that is the case, are we educating our people, our future farmers, enough to deal with that issue? They are doing it elsewhere. If you go across the world, they will be doing that. So the question is whether we are preparing ours to compete with the best in the world.
Thank you. Majority Leader, I will encourage you, nominee, to exercise some brevity in answering questions. You have 2 hours engagement with us.
I'm trying, Mr. Chairman. It's just the breadth of the question.
Yes, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, maybe I'll start the CS nominee from his response to Mr. Ura's affidavit. in respect to your suitability for appointment based on your professional academic qualifications. And you responded by saying that the fundamental criteria for appointment to such a position is based on one's ability to provide effective leadership and service to the public. And in that regard, you say you have the requisite qualifications to serve as Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture, despite not having any training in agriculture. And probably you also didn't have any training in health when you served as Health Minister. But CS, in my view, you did well in terms of communicating, especially around the COVID time. You were on TV, in fact, people christened you the COVID CS. I would want to hear what exactly you intend to do, because again, in my view, we have had a communication problem, and more so in the State Department for Livestock and also the State Department for Agriculture. You remember last year the issues that we had with subsidized fertilizer procurement and the communication that came around that issue. Towards the end of the year, we also had a similar problem. I had to withdraw a bill that came to Parliament from the State Department of Livestock, the Livestock Bill, largely on account of the disinformation that was being propelled in both mainstream and social media. And this bill is anchored on policies that are espoused by the government through the ministry. I would want to hear what you intend to do now as Cabinet Secretary. One, to provide that effective leadership within the ministry, to communicate effectively to the public what is contained in the bills that you will bring to Parliament, because Parliament tends, and in this case, my office of the Leader of Majority, we tend to take the flak from everybody, believing that all legislation that comes from government is authored by parliamentarians and the office of the Leader of Majority. So I want to hear first what you intend to do to ensure that there is effective leadership in terms of communication. And as I said, in my view, you have done well in your previous postings, whether it was in ICT or in health. To CS, I've also noted from your CV and the documents that have been submitted, as Cabinet Secretary in the past, you have served for 2 years in all the ministries you have served. Is it coincidence or fate? Because you are CS Health for 2 years, you are CS ICT again for 2 years. Are you going to be CS Livestock Agriculture for 2 years since you are being appointed in 2025? I don't know whether it's fate or by design. Lastly, you have spoken at length on the nexus between farming and the profit and loss for the farmer, and what you would want to see in the ministry. We have also heard from government, especially from the president, that we have now, as a country, fixed our production side. I would want to hear, and again, based on your training as a student of commerce, what exactly do you intend to do to ensure that there is a proper nexus between the productivity that we are saying we have increased, whether it's sugar, whether it's maize, whether it's rice. How do you link that to markets? And bearing in mind that coffee, the coffee you are speaking about drying in your younger years, most of the marketing is done in the Ministry of Agriculture. It's in our State Department, in cooperatives, I think. Whether it is milk, again, you produce, the marketing is with someone else. Coffee you produce, tea you produce, marketing is done by someone else. How are you going to create that nexus to ensure that also the country benefits from your experience as a marketer and as a student of commerce to make farming profitable, not just for future farmers, but even for our current farmers, many of who probably are not as tech savvy as the younger generation. And I would really want, I was looking to hear when you spoke about the P&L, how you intend to get that nexus between the good productivity that we now have to making profits for farmers to make it profitable, because that's the only way you'll be able to sustain. This sector has been riddled by cartels, whether it is in the tea sector, coffee sector, milk sector, there are cartels all over. And we have seen in the past people come into this office very good-looking people like yourself, with very good intentions, but they get swallowed by the cartels.
Thank you.
How do you intend to protect yourself from being swallowed by these coffee cartels, tea cartels, milk cartels?
Brevity.
Mr. Chairman, you'll agree that there's quite a bit to respond to here, but I'll try and be as brief as I can.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa. Let me start with the issue of communication, because I think that is what you laid emphasis on. I think the first thing to remember is that in my capacity, if I'm approved by this committee, in my capacity as a cabinet secretary, I am simply a cog. I'm simply part of a cog of people and stakeholders that must be involved in the decision-making processes that you have referred to.
You can't be part of a cog. You can be a cog in a wheel.
Yes.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed, Mr. Chairman. One of the cogs. That is what I am. And Mr. Chairman, the long and short of it is the following, that it is not possible to make progress in that area unless we work together with the stakeholders. We have got to have a consultative approach to these things. Cows belong to individuals. Maize in chambers belong to individuals. They don't belong to the government. You know, coffee in coffee farms belong to individuals. So any decision that we make has got to be made with those individuals who are the owners of the of whatever products and commodities that we are going to be discussing. That's number one. Number two is that they are experts in these areas. They are also experts who have been trained to make decisions in those areas. And I'll tie that up with what you said about COVID, the issues of COVID, which I'll come to on its own at some point if the chairman will allow. And to say the following, that part of the reason why there was so much necessity of communicating virtually every day to the people is the weighty issue that was at hand. You are talking about life and death of people. And therefore, you need to keep them abreast with any issue that is developing in relation to their own lives. Because that is what it came down to. Similar, and that's why we had a press conference virtually every day, whether it was made by myself or other players, other ministry officials. It was determined, we determined that that is the way we were going to handle communication to them. Now, to do so, we got the right information from the people who are technically qualified to give that information. We had epidemiologists, you know, led by one Professor Anzara, who informed us about the right thing to tell people and the information that people need in order for them to make their own decisions. So the first thing is that we have got to be consultative. We have got to make people, we have got to consult people. We have got to consult the owners. We have got to, the owners of agriculture. We have got to consider the experts of agriculture so that as we make progress, we move together. We work together. If you take an example, and I mentioned coffee, even sugar. You know, you cannot make decisions about sugar unless we involve the person who is actually going out there growing sugar, you know, on day-to-day basis. The sugar actually belongs to him. And there is also obviously consultations with the other bodies, for example, this organization, you know, the National Assembly and the Senate. There are institutions that are involved in what we are doing at the ministry. And you will remember, Mr. Chairman, that agriculture is essentially a devolved function. In Schedule 4 of the Constitution, there are the areas that are supposed to be handled by the county governments, and it divides it into areas that are also supposed to be handled by the national government. So we have to involve the stakeholders who are going to be largely, and to a large extent, the county governments. So in terms of communication, I want to be clear that we are going to establish a very robust, you know, communication system that is going to be both in mainstream media as well as social media. And I know that Mr. Chairman, the Honorable Leader of Majority spoke about the ills sometimes, you know, the negatives that come. I think sometimes we have to agree that in this day and age in the democracy, we have got to take both the positives and the negatives, and they are going to keep coming anyway, and that is not going to change. So I think for me, what I would like to do is use the same social media, use the same mainstream media, work with the fourth estate to try and disseminate information as much as I can to the farming community. And it won't be the first time, because during the period you have referred to, during the COVID period, part of the key players in terms of dissemination of information and the buy-in to the activities of government was actually members of the fourth estate. They are the ones who assisted us to succeed. And I want to say that my intention is to continue to work with the fourth estate as openly and as transparently as I can. We will be criticized, and that's fine too, because oversight is part of their job. So I intend to keep very closely, to work very closely with them. The area of social media. Social media is an area that has come to both help us. It helps us a great deal. There is also the negativity in the social media. And I know that, Mr. Chairman, if one were to talk broadly and say leadership has been made that substantially harder, through social media. But part of the hardship and headaches that one gets from social media is also part of the way that we can communicate more easily, to our people, because they are also on social media. And that which you cannot change, you might as well use, because we are not going to be able to change some of the communication channels that exist. And indeed, we can use them very positively for ourselves. Mr. Chairman, there was a nexus that the Honorable Leader of the majority wanted me to explain, and that's the issue of the PLL and the production capacity that has clearly increased. It's a fantastic example of what I'm talking about. The reason why the production has increased is twofold. One is because of the good climates that we have fortunately experienced, but two, and to a large extent, is also subsidized fertilizers. It's part of the reason why this increase has come in almost all products, both cash crop and as well as food crops. There has been an increase. Now, when you increase production and you are able to save on post-harvest challenges, it means that the farmer gets this bigger quantity that he has got. But the market is huge. The market for these products is not just here. The market for both livestock as well as crops is both in Kenya and external. Information about the markets is what has largely been missing. And part of this is also the deployment of technology. Because now, with a mobile app, you are able to tell where tomatoes have got better prices instantly. But this information is around somewhere, floating somewhere in the market. It's our responsibility as ministry to make sure that that information is available. You also alluded to the issue of the fact that the marketing aspect of most of those cash crops, the boards and everything, is in the Ministry of Cooperatives. That's fine too, because we work in a collective area. We have collective responsibility. Every ministry in government will automatically have to relate with another ministry in government. And it is not just the Ministry of Cooperatives that we have got to work with. We have got to work with the Ministry of Energy, for example. Right now we are waiting for the Ministry of Energy to connect to Kenani, to the Kenani leather park that the ministry is establishing. We are waiting for the Ministry of Water, to also connect water. So we will have to work collectively. We have to work together. Again, coming back to the example that you gave, if you look at the management of COVID-19, it was a whole government approach, whereas the central ministry was the Ministry of Health. The activities that were happening, keeping law and order, the Ministry of Health does not have any askaris. That is Interior that was assisting us in keeping order. The Ministry of Health does not have, is not in charge of matatus and so on. Yet, we are to contain even containment measures, included the transport sector. So we have to work with the CS for transport. Education is not part of health, but it was a huge, huge part of the activities on the Ministry of Health during the COVID period. That too simply illustrates that you need to work collectively with other ministries, and that forms part of collective responsibility.
Yes. Jeanette?
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. Chair, I wanted to ask the Honorable
Which chair?
Chairman, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Chairman. Chairman, I want to ask the nominee.
I gave the latitude to your colleague. Now, muulize swali moja moja.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One is a general question. Chairman, I want to remind the nominee or to inform him that in the last 2.5 years, he will be the third minister for agriculture. There was one who came at the beginning, second one came, we vetted him, you are the third one we are vetting. If you are approved by this house to become the minister for agriculture. And the last one we vetted, I asked him a question. I told him, do you know what you're getting into? He told me, yes, I know. I want to ask you also, do you know what you're getting into that ministry? You need to tell me more what you think of that. The second issue is the people or the ministry concentrates so much on agriculture and normally forgets about livestock. And in many countries in the world, their GDP growth is even contributed much higher by livestock than agriculture. What do you think you will do in the livestock sector so that the GDP, the livestock sector can contribute to the GDP of the country? And what is your position on the vaccine that's being proposed to give to livestock in this country? What do you think it is? Or how will you implement it? Or what are your views on that thing?
Point of order.
Yes.
I think if you allowed 3 questions, because many of the questions, you will easily answer them with, many responses.
Yes, that's what I was going to do.
Okay.
Posing.
Thank you, Chairman, Speaker. To the nominee, Honorable Mutahi Kagwe. Following what Honorable Junet said, many people think that the Ministry of Agriculture is crops, forgetting the bigger, which is livestock. My question will be, what will you do, particularly the pastoralist people, who keep a lot of animals, but during let's say, drought or something like that, they lose all of them. What would you think, or what will you do, or what will you tell them to listen, that even before drought, for example, that you can buy all of these animals and then give them money to wait until drought goes, then you bring number 2. You are going to be Minister of Agriculture. Where is agriculture? There's no agriculture in national level, in my view. If you look at also fourth schedule of the Constitution, agriculture is devolved. So when you are minister for who or for what at national level? Are you going to be marketing officer of agriculture, or what is it? And yet agriculture is at level. My proposal will be, or what I want to hear from you, what nexus or structure, legal structures or implementable structures that will be between you yourself and the counties. Because without counties government, without county people, agriculture will just be almost, at national level, it will be a talk show if you don't bring in counties in terms of implementation. Thank you, Chairman.
Nelson?
Thank you very much. Many commentators, Mr. Honorable Mutahi, believe that you did actually handle the COVID-19 quite brilliantly. But however, there are questions and or misappropriation, massive theft at that time, particularly in Kemsa. There are cases that have been handled by this House, particularly by the Parliamentary Accounts Committee, and I just want to draw your attention to a few of them. Number 1 is a question on expenditure of 2 billion on budgeted items in breach of regulation in 2015. Rather, Regulation 2015 requiring public officers to act in the government's interest to be aware on essentials of vote control process. There's also single sourcing of COVID masks supplied contrary to Section 69(2) of the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act. I will not highlight all of them, but most importantly also was the acquisition, nominee on vaccines. It is believed that you failed to account on the procurement of 1.6 billion worth of vaccines, and it is still a subject of investigation by this House. What do you have to say about all that was said at that time, that there was a lot of misappropriation in KEMSA? Number two, I come from an area which predominantly grows tea, and I want to hear, and I will like to read so that I don't misadventure, that tea prices in Mombasa auction were on a downward trend in 2022, forcing the government to establish a minimum reserve price of USD 2.6 for the teas from the east of the rift and the USD 2.4 for teas from the west of the rift. This initiative was aimed at stabilizing the market and addressing the declining tea prices at the Mombasa auction. However, the current pricing structure has resulted in several millions of teas being unsold, thus resulting in stagnating warehouses and facilities. What strategies will you implement to alleviate the situation? Additionally, is government interference in this manner necessary in a free market, and how can it be balanced to ensure market stability without causing adverse effects? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable nominee, I sit in a Committee of Environment and Forestry, where climate change is a huge topic. And most of the time, whenever we go around, over and above the environmental issues, farmers do ask about this climate change, which affects agriculture, be it crop, be it livestock, and things like that. And the issue that always comes is that they don't have any information as to, initially we used to know Kenya, by around February, you start preparing your land for purposes of planting and things like that. But it is no longer. So what policy are you going to put in place to try and address the climate change issue, which is affecting agriculture? And lastly, Chair, it's about somebody has just asked me from the constituency regarding what is your view on this livestock vaccination, the debate that is going on. What is your view? Thank you, Chair.
Answer those from
Thank you.
Honorable Junet down to Gikaria.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me start by answering the Honorable Junet's question, which relates also to one that had been asked by the majority leader about the 2 to 3 years, which because they are kind of the same, because I'm the third minister. First of all, of course, is to say that I've been happy to serve, no matter how the period. You're happy to serve, because the idea is to make a difference. And sometimes it is not how the length of time that you do a job in, it is what you put into the time that you have got that you can make a difference in. I have no idea why 2 years into government, I was invited by the 3 previous, including the current president, because obviously they are appointing authorities. But I want to answer your question, and perhaps related to also to Honorable Koeshi's question. You asked me whether I know what I'm getting myself into. And from the questions that you have heard from Honorable Koesh, yes, I can relate to your question and what you are asking regarding the prices and so on. Mr. Chairman, you will remember that one day in 2020, I stood outside Afia House, and it is on record even in the media. I pointed at Afia House, and I said that there are many cartels in this building. I said it myself. It was not said by other people. I am the one who said it sitting in there. So as I went into the ministry, I was quite aware that there are cartels. And I'm quite aware that even this one, there are cartels in it. That's the first thing. The second thing is to say that cartels fight back. Cartels will fight back. And some of the stuff that you're hearing coming out is a question of cartels fighting back. Not only would I expect them to fight me back once you start fighting them, in fact, I'm ready for the battle, because I know the battle is going to come. And the cartels will definitely fight back. But I want to say that irrespective of the war that is clearly going to be there, there are sufficient people in Kenya. There are enough people in the ministry, there are enough people in this parliament, there are enough people in Kenyans out there who are going to be extremely supportive in that fight. You know, I am confident about that. And your job in this house, as you oversight, as you make sure that you oversight, is also to make sure that you assist us also, you know, in those battles with cartels, that you'll obviously come and fight back so that they can take. In the area of COVID, for example, and I pointed it out, is that as we started the restructuring of KEMSA, and I want to say to Honorable Koech that, you know, it is very difficult for us to remember back at the crisis that we had in 2019, and as particularly after the 12th of March of 2020, when the pandemic was actually declared globally. Mr. Chairman, we were faced by a severe situation. What we are calling, what today sells for nothing, which is a mask for your face, was so rare that people were willing in the streets of Nairobi to pay 3,000, 5,000 shillings for a mask, which is now free in most places and you can take. So when people say, and part of the big question regarding that period and part of the COVID billionaire issues and so on that we have had to do with the prices of issues, the prices of goods, the prices of commodities and health, and what was necessary to contain this disease in our country. Mr. Speaker, I remember appearing in this house to explain these issues and to say at that time in 2020, for example, we were looking for anybody who could give us a mask. And yes, I am the first person to admit that it wasn't an opportune time, that indeed there was abuse of process in KEMSA and other procuring agencies at that time, and not just in the Ministry of Health, but widely. But I think the major concern, the major interest at the time, and I can give you one clear example. For instance, the PPEs. We were looking for protection gear for our doctors and nurses. We didn't have any. A PPE could easily sell for 15,000 shillings, 9,000 shillings, etc. And I can tell you, Honorable Koech, that if they came at 20,000 shillings, we would have bought them. Because it's a question of, are you going to wait or are you going to buy at whatever price to save lives? Money almost begins to take a secondary position when it comes to life and death, and that is what it was. But we are also the same people who worked on it. What steps did we take? I called all the manufacturers of the materials. I sat outside my office with a bottle of water, testing materials to see whether they could be able to be used for PPEs with the experts in the Ministry of Health. And consequent to that, we were able to use our own people in Shona, in Athi River, in Nakuru. We were able to use our own people to produce the same materials at a quarter of the price. And now today, the same PPEs can be produced in our country at 2,000 shillings or less than 2,000 shillings. So it wasn't an appropriate time. A lot of mistakes were made, and I'll tell you that and confirm that indeed there were mistakes made. But I would also like to say that at the prices that I was saying, and this is what I explained to Parliament, and I challenged this House, at the time that we were buying PPEs at, say, 9,000 shillings, I said I would like somebody to show me any place where the PPE was selling at less than that price. And I remember, Mr. Chairman, going to Aga Khan Hospital, going to Nairobi Hospital. Everybody was desperate and the prices were crazy all over the town. It wasn't that the Ministry of Health was buying those items at a higher price than the rest of the world or the rest of the country. We were buying it at the market prices at that time. And this is something that I have explained, you know, at length. Mr. Chairman, the handling of COVID-19 at that time was such a nightmare. It was such a nightmare that and the cost to people, the cost of lives. Every day we would wake up to be told that 10,000 people are being buried in New York. The Italian government has given up and surrendered, that everybody is dying. In South America, people are being dragged out of houses and being burnt outside, they are cremated outside their own houses. So it wasn't a time that people were making very, very rational decisions. It was a desperate period, but we did what we had to do. And Kenya, by the way, is one of the countries that got praised because of the work that they did. And Mr. Chairman, I will say this. I am prepared to do, I take responsibility, and I did, and I said everything that happened that was not correct in my ministry, and throughout that COVID period, we must take responsibility because it was there. The negatives, I take responsibility. The positives, I give credit to the team that was working at the ministry. All the members of the National Emergency Response Committee, of which I chaired, that included members of the Defense Forces, members of I am prepared to do, I take responsibility, and I did, and I said everything that happened that was not correct in my ministry, and throughout that COVID period. But why the Indian government, Mr. Chairman, the handling of COVID-19 at that time was such a nightmare. It was such a nightmare that and the cost to people, the cost of life, handling of COVID-19 at that time was such a nightmare. It was such a nightmare that and the cost to people, the cost of lives. Every day we would wake up to be told that 10,000 people are being buried in New York. The Italian government has given up and surrendered, that everybody is dying. In South America, people are being dragged out of houses and being burnt outside, they are cremated outside their own houses. So it wasn't a time that people were making very, very rational decisions. It was a desperate period, but we did what we had to do. And Kenya, by the way, is one of the countries that got praised because of the work that they did. And Mr. Chairman, I will say this. I am prepared to do, I take responsibility, and I did, and I said everything that happened that was not correct in my ministry, and throughout that COVID period, we must take responsibility because it was there. The negatives, I take responsibility. The positives, I give credit to the team that was working at the ministry. All the members of the National Emergency Response Committee, of which I chaired, that included members of the Defense Forces, members of all ministries that were involved. We took collective decisions. In the issue of vaccines, we took collective decisions for vaccines. And the whole issue of the expenditure on vaccines, Mr. Chairman, is actually exaggerated. Because 90% of the vaccines that we actually used in Kenya were donated. There were donations from the United States government, from the World Health Organization, from European governments. Yes, they were of a great value, and they were valued at a lot of money, but they were free. We got a lot of those things for free. We didn't actually buy a lot of those ones. The ones that we bought, the ones that we ordered from Johnson & Johnson in South Africa. In fact, the quantity that we were supposed to get, we never even utilized in full, because by the time we had developed immunity and stopped the delivery of. So there were several issues that one can speak about. And as for KEMSA, it is true. When I said that there are cartels out there, it was true. And what did we do? What did I do as minister? You remember, Mr. Chairman, that we carried out a complete re-engineering of KEMSA. Change of staff, restructuring the organization, at least in the time when I was there. So we did take action about it. And I'm the one who invited the investigating authorities to come and go through it so that we can see how we can change the entire structure to do a better job in a crisis like that. For me, Mr. Chairman, what I say is that I hope, because there will be another pandemic, it is not a question of whether it will be there. It's not a question of if it will come. Looking at the global situation today, it is very likely that we are going to get some zoonotic and other pathogens that will cause pandemics in the future. And it's a question of being prepared for it and hope to God that there will be somebody sitting in those offices where he or she will have to make some very difficult decisions, notwithstanding the fact that eventually they could be verified for those decisions. But I hope to God they will have the guts to go on anyway and save lives. Mr. Chairman, on the issue of tea, and I know that this is an issue because of the tea that is actually lying in Mombasa, at the Mombasa auction. Mr. Chairman, I know that my predecessor had set a committee to deal with the issue of tea, and I want to say that I agree with those people who are saying that there is an interference of businesses that governments can go to a length to do and mess the process in the first place. So there is a degree of regulation that you want to carry out, and indeed we will carry out some regulation, but the regulation will be to improve the market. Our job, as you asked about what is the ministry going itself doing, given the fact that it is Schedule 4 divides it amongst both the county governments and the national government. I think if you look at Schedule 4, you'll see that the breadth of involvement of the national government is quite large. And if you are involved in the policy, if you are involved in research, if you are involved in financing, if you are involved in creating markets for these products, then you will have to work, as you rightly said, in the joint committee of both the county governments and the national government. Again, I would like to confirm that this is not the first time I'm going to do this. During the COVID period or during my days as Cabinet Secretary for Health, that's what we did. We had constant communication. We had several meetings with the CECs for health. And I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, we even managed to bring in to the ministry the CECs for health to be part of the teams in the Ministry of Health at headquarters, so that you can create the linkages between the county governments and the national and the national government. So part of the price stabilization is to make sure that we are opening new markets. You know that our biggest competitors in the tea sector is China and India, and they have got varieties of tea that they produce. But we must also ensure something else and this is where the regulatory framework comes in. We must make sure that even as we talk about the prices, we talk about the quality of tea that we are producing. We must ensure that we have got a minimum regulated quality of tea that can be called the Kenya tea. Because unless we do that, our tea is famous all over the world because of quality, not because of the quantity. So we must ensure that we preserve and secure the quality of our tea as much as we can, even as we open new markets for it. Mr. Chairman, sorry.
No, touch on overemphasis on crops as opposed to livestock.
I was getting there, Mr. Chairman.
And then climate change.
Yeah.
So that we go to other questions.
I was getting there, Mr. Chairman. I think the honorable member said that livestock has got the capability and possibility of actually becoming a bigger industry, and that is true. Because if you look at countries like Ethiopia, our neighbors out here, the leather industry in Ethiopia is huge. But again, Mr. Chairman, we must look at the livestock farming in its holistic form. Because when we talk about the animals that are grazing, we have to go back to that farmer. And I said earlier, and I go back to it, we have got to make sure that that farmer is earning his bit. Part of the measures that we must take, especially in the pastoralist community, is education and extension farming, extension livestock experts. They must talk to our livestock grazers and our livestock keepers and the breeders themselves. Because part of the way that we can develop the leather industry is it comes back all the way to the skin that the animal is walking in, because that is where the quality of the leather first starts. For example, if you have got barbed wire in the compound, and a cow grazes along the barbed wire and tears just a little bit on its skin, that leather is already affected. It is as complicated as that. Mr. Speaker, you'll find that the leather that we are producing in terms of quality is second and third grade. So we have got to go back to the farmer and say, as you keep the cow, since you want to make money, make sure that the skin, the hides and skins are taken care of. We must go all the way to the guys who are not just feeding the cows. What feedstuffs are we giving these cows? And you'll find that when we are looking at a basic cow for export, 200 kilos is the average weight of our cows. Out there, they are looking for 350 kilograms cows. So in terms of meat, in terms of hides and skins, it's an area that we need to work on and improve. And we need to work with the pastoralist community. We must sit together and work on those ideas that are there, because there is nothing very, very new. They know it. Now, when it comes to the leather industry, the formation of the leather park in Machakos is a huge development for us. It's a big thing. And so we must make use of it. This is a time when we can get the Gushis of this world, coming here so that we can make proper leather. The affluent plant, which has already been constructed, is actually the biggest single contribution in terms of the leather industry that we want to develop. And I'll be there, and I'll make sure that the plant is complete, and also the engagement with the pastoralists as well as other livestock farmers, is complete and engaged. Mr. Chairman, I also want to talk about the policy on insurance, because I think it's crucial. We must make sure that our farmers, the pastoralists, have insurance for cattle. Because if they do not have insurance, and I have been there at one time, I remember distinctly, Mr. Chairman, going to Mandela at one time, trying to get the farmers to agree to sell their cows, because KMC was buying them, but they were not agreeing to sell. So there is also a cultural aspect that we have to deal with, and agree that it is there. And say to them that, look, when times come for drought, let's sell these cows, so that then we can create a revolving fund, so that at the time when the rains come, we can go back and restock the cattle. And I think it's also important to teach this issue of insurance, because largely there is no communication on it. Them, but they were not agreeing to sell. So there is also a cultural aspect that we have to deal with, and agree that it is there. And say to them that, look, when times come for drought, let's sell these cows, so that then we can create a revolving fund, so that at the time when the rains come, we can go back and restock the cattle. And I think it's also important to teach this issue of insurance, because largely there is no communication on it. Yet, there are very many organizations that are involved in this insurance for livestock. And I think we must push that agenda, and I'll be at the forefront of ensuring that it is there. But more than the insurance is also to make sure that the insurance premiums are affordable. So there is no point of saying there is livestock insurance, but the insurance is too high. People can't afford it. So we have got to go back and ask ourselves, how do we make sure that there is so much livestock, there are so many cows that are being insured, that in terms of the insurance premiums, they can come down. Because insurance works on the basis of probability. The probability that something bad is going to happen diminishes as long as the base itself is becoming, has been widened. So there's a lot to do, I agree. I cannot profess to be an expert sitting here, but I think there is the will, and I intend to work on it. Mr. Chairman, you'll allow me to also talk about the environment, because it has also been raised by Honorable Gikaria. The issue of the environment and farming. Mr. Chairman, as we said, there is an issue on this climate change that is right in front of us, and that is the issue to do with the European Union deforestation regulation, where the European Union is coming out with the rules that say that if we are deforesting to plant crops or to farm, we will not be able to export our commodities, animals, and products to the European Union. Now, this is something that we can't afford because that is our biggest market for virtually most of our agricultural products. So it is not just because they are asking us to do it. And Mr. Chairman, I like to say that in terms of what the Europeans have set as a standard of climate change or climate specifications that they want to set, in my opinion, Kenya is actually ahead of it. Because, Mr. Chairman, not only are we not cutting forests in order to plant things like coffee, for example, in the coffee sector, we are actually planting trees in the coffee farms. We are planting grevillea trees that grow in tandem with the coffee. In any event, coffee is a tree itself. So when it comes to the issue of planting, you know, being the EU DR regulations, I think we are going to meet the, I suppose the deadline is this year, but I think we are going to discuss with them and meet that, their demand. But more importantly, Mr. Chairman, is that agroforestry is also agriculture. And
his question was, the farmer used to know that you planned at the end of February, the rains will be there 1st March. Now it's not the case. How are you going to keep information flow to the farmer on the changing patterns of weather?
I'll get there, Mr. Chairman.
That's what he asked, and yeah.
I'll get there, Mr. Chairman, but I did want to raise this issue of EUDR because it is part and parcel of this thing of climate change. And Mr. Chairman, technology is going to assist us. The biggest thing in terms of the Honorable Gikaria's question is technology. We all know that these days, the meteorology department can actually predict very well. If you look at your mobile app and look at it, we can predict very well. There was a time when we talk about Rasha, pale na pale, you know, which was never going to happen. But I think that we are very confident. And as AI develops, the predictability and our ability to tell the weather is going to become more and more precise. And therefore, at that point, what then do we do? Because information is one thing, but what do you do when you do it? We need drought-resistant crops, drought-resistant animals that can withstand higher heat and longer and higher temperatures that currently exist. This is a scientific issue, and we are going to work with the research organizations to make sure that at least we mitigate part of what can be very severe natural disasters.
Thank you. Yes, Janet?
Chairman, I know the nominee was once a politician, but he has cleverly evaded the issue of the vaccine. And we know each other why he's doing that.
Mr. Chairman, it is indeed true that I was once a politician, but that is not, but I wasn't evading the question because the matter is very simple to me. And in consultation with those in agriculture, we have also come to the same conclusion. I think the long and short of it is the following. Number one is that my understanding is that the whole vaccination process is to address two diseases. It is to address the PPR and foot and mouth disease. That's what the issue is about. Mr. Chairman, you know, we talked about earlier about social media and what can be propaganda and otherwise. And I think the most important thing is to involve those involved in the industry, including the members of this House, is to involve those involved with the information that we have and say, this is a vaccine, it is being made by Kevavapi, who are our own people, it is for this and this purpose. We only vaccinate about 10% of our livestock. We want to vaccinate more than that. But the point of the matter is this. The cow, as I said earlier, belongs to an individual. It doesn't belong to the government. The goat belongs to an individual, not to the government. So the matter is simple. Here is a vaccine. It is for foot and mouth disease. You have a goat. Do you want the goat to be vaccinated? You say, yes, I want to be vaccinated. We vaccinate. You say, no, I don't want my goat to be vaccinated. Sawa. Do you have a cow? Do you want the cow to be vaccinated? This is the reason why it is to be vaccinated. You say, yes, we vaccinate. You say, no, we don't vaccinate. Allah?
Thank you.
Point
Yes,
of order.
Robert.
Point of order, Honorable Chairman, point of order.
Yes, Mishi?
I think, Chairman, on the same breath, because there is a lot of misconception and a lot of negative narrative, so we wanted to hear from the nominee, how is he going to address to the public and put some trust to the public regarding the vaccination? We wanted to hear on that perspective.
Thank you, Honorable Mishi. The communication aspect of it is huge. The communication aspect of this is very big. And I'm going to use the experts. I'm going to use the experts in Kevavapi. I'm going to use the experts who understand this very well to be actually the lead communicators, just like we did with COVID, where we had the doctors themselves explain the issue. We also want to use the veterinary officers to themselves explain what we are trying to do. So you can be sure, Honorable Member, that I am going to put a very robust communication system on this matter.
Robert Mbui,
Yeah, thank you.
Baya, Murugara.
Speaker, maybe before we leave that issue of vaccines,
Yes.
because I remember CS Mutahi telling us, if I can get it, you can get it on COVID. And largely, the issue of vaccines, the problem has been misinformation and the people communicating. Because the ministry has left it to the political class to communicate, and probably, should he be approved, is the area around that communication that he will need to look into, so that the right people, as you say, communicate, but also communicate the right information to the car owners. Because again, if we leave it to the members of the public to decide, since the cow is mine, and I base my decision on misinformation, I could decide not to vaccinate my cow to my detriment and the detriment of the country's productivity. Probably, since he has already answered that, but just for information, Honorable Speaker, that should he be approved, that's some of the challenges you find.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Hold
As I
there,
said,
you'll come to
Sorry.
that. Robert?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The nominee says that he's very passionate to assist Kenyan farmers. Now, I have very quick concerns. One, there was this major scandal of fake fertilizer that made our Kenyan farmers lose very heavily. With your passion, will you consider initiating a process of compensating those farmers that lost, negatively, that were affected negatively by this scandal? There's also media reports, and this is what members here are talking about, indicating that despite there being no budgetary allocation, this issue of livestock vaccination is actually being propagated by multinationals that want to test vaccines on our animals. What is your comment on that? And finally, the government has been accused in the recent past of regulation of private business, especially agriculture. I mean, there's regulations on you have to get a license to grow, a license to harvest, a license to transport, a license to store, a license to sell. What is your comment on that? Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Nominee, I would like to ask you the following question. One, just on the oil crops and the cost of edible oils in Kenya, there has been a over-reliance on the importation of edible oils. And yet this country, especially at the coast, has huge potential to actually bring down the cost of edible oils and actually grow our GDP. crops like coconut, cashew nuts, ground nuts, and many other nuts that grow at the coast. But there has been little investment in this sector, especially there, and farmers there feel that they have lost their land, and production, and there's nothing they get out of the land because government has not invested in these crops. What will you do if approved as Cabinet Secretary to ensure the people at the coast do not continue to suffer loss of productivity? Secondly, what is your position on GMO crops in Kenya? What is your position on the genetically modified organism crops in this country? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Murugara.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is on value addition to agricultural produce, and this involves crops and livestock production. The first one is that the reason why farmers are actually finding it difficult to get into agriculture is because they have to sell their crops raw without any value addition, as a result of which they are so cheap that it is expensive to grow them, it is cheap to sell those crops. Number two, also use of prohibited pesticides and chemicals to spray the crops. And when it comes to livestock, to actually vaccinate, as you have just explained, and to treat the diseases that affect our livestock. Some of the chemicals we use, pesticides, are banned in countries where we are supposed to be selling those crops. What are you likely to do so that you are able to cut the niche of the market out there as regards our agricultural crops and our livestock?
Ferdinand.
Nominee, I come from Tanzania, and I want to be very, very specific. First and foremost, distribution of the fertilizer. Farmers must be attracted to do their job, but the distribution of fertilizers in the country is bad because it's put in one place and the farmers have to travel miles and miles to get whatever they want to go, so that the cost of agricultural production goes up. And so most of them are actually discouraged. Secondly, and I want to just correct you, you talked about the youths. I think you have to get the youth to get into extension services, because that is very, very important. And for you to get this youth, you must have a program to attract the youth so that we have these extension services so that the youth can be able to go there and do some work. And I think it's very important that we get that right. Lastly, if you don't mind, we had fake fertilizers, and the farmers, I don't know whether somebody asked that, but I don't think, yeah, somebody asked that. If we did, then of course, specifically, we have ADC land. And you rightly say the population of this country is going up. And yet ADC farms are lying idle. What are you going to do if you actually make you a minister for agriculture? Be specific on this one. Thank you.
Last on that round, Naisula.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the issue on livestock farm, I just want to put it to Honorable Mutahi Kagwe that it's one thing to speak very flowery words about leather, about livestock, but when you look even at the budgetary allocation that is given to the State Department on livestock, it is very minimal. And being honest as a country in ensuring that we take livestock matters seriously, because if you look at even the funding, most of the time it is donor funded. And donor funded, it is for a specific period and for specific interventions, but not the whole aspect of it. But my question to you is that the whole issue on research as a country, in the past we have been a very, a country that is known for its research, and mostly on our foods, on even the livestock, on agriculture. I'd like to know what you think about us as a country on the measures that we are putting in place and what we need to do to ensure that research goes back to where it was and gets the necessary funding because that is important.
Nominee, you can answer those 5.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me start with the issue of the fake fertilizers that was raised, because it has been raised by quite a number of members. And to answer as follows. Number one is that obviously that was an extremely unfortunate thing to do. Mr. Chairman, there are 2 areas that I find almost reasonable. One of them is the area of seeds, fake seeds, and the other one is fake fertilizers. Because where in Australia they said that GMO products being used in its country, if approved, would adopt. Number one is this: whether GMO, whether pesticide, whether fertilizer, if that product is not being used in its country of origin, it will not be used in Kenya. If it is a fertilizer, if it is a GMO product, if it is a seed.
Do you know the case of Roundup?
Yes, I'm aware of the case of Roundup. I'm conversant with that debate, Mr. Chairman. In fact, there was a luring in Australia, I think it's this week or last week, that was made on the same, where in Australia they said that it is not carcinogenic, but this is something that I will sit with my scientists and my decide that decisions will be made on the basis of science and data. Because it is not enough that I proclaim here, but I can tell you that there will be no product that is going to be sold in this country under my watch in the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock that is going to be a product being tested here. We are not guinea pigs. We will not be used by anybody as guinea pigs. I am aware, Mr. Chairman, for example, there are some organizations overseas that are rebranding their products so that instead of coming as the main product which has been banned overseas, they rebrand themselves as another product so that we can pass it here. And I can tell you that we will be as vigilant as we can be to ensure that we protect our farmers as well as our private sector players. In terms of the taxation regime, because I think, Honorable Member, that's what you are referring to. Yeah, the regulations and the many things that you have to pay. You have to pay for research, you have to pay for transport, you have to pay just to be able to export. You have to be able to, every single document has got a tax on it. You know, this is something that we need to look at, because by the end of the day, it would be better to create a bigger volume of business people and tax them a little than to have just a few business people, which you tax a lot. Because the bigger volume of business people create jobs, you know, the less ones don't. So I'll be fighting, you know, for that position to change. You know, I'll do whatever I can within the Ministry of Agriculture. But of course, this is something I have to work with my colleagues, you know, in other. On the issue of oil crops and farming of palm oil and other nuts, so on, particularly in the coast, yes, I completely agree that this is something that we have missed an opportunity here, because we are only producing about 10% of these oils. Yes, we use them every day. So we are using foreign exchange unnecessarily when we can actually grow palm oil. We have seen countries that have changed completely. Uganda, next door, is growing a lot of their oils now. So there is no reason why we can't do it. But I also know that we have got to work with the extension farmers that Mheshimiwa Wanyonyi also referred to. We have got to have educated extension farmers to change some of the cultural norms that our people have against or for farming certain goods. For example, I know for a fact that AFA has produced a huge quantity of coconut seedlings that they are trying to distribute. And therefore, there is an education and extension work that is required there to go and tell the people, we have got this, but it's not enough that you go to a farmer and tell them you have got coconut seedlings. How do you plant them? Where do you plant them? What sort of fertilizer do you use? Is it organic fertilizer? Is it, you know, mineral fertilizer? So there is quite a bit to be done so that we stop blaming the people and take responsibility ourselves to grow. On the issue of GMO, again, I repeat what I said. But we must also ask ourselves, what is GMO? You know, this genetic modified organism, what is the mischief that this organism, this genetic change is supposed to have done? And there are two sides to this. There is a positive side and there's a negative side. And one of the first things that we must do is ensure that the National Biosafety Authority is sufficiently funded, is sufficiently prepared to deal with GMOs. You cannot deal with GMOs in your country until you have got the institutional framework to make sure that the regulatory framework is there, to make sure that the rules and regulations to deal with those products and services are there, so that we are clear that if a GMO product comes, it will be to the benefit of our nation. And there are some benefits to some of the products. For example, if you look at the cotton growing areas, and you look at BT, and what has happened because of the absence of the worm, you can see that cotton is now increasing. We are now having more cotton. So they are, and let's also forget that genetic modification of plants happens naturally anyway. The maize that we are growing today is not the maize that we originally got from Mexico, centuries ago. It's a different one. Wheat is not the same. What is critical is for us to ensure that we are not used by people for testing their GMO products. If you have got a GMO product that you have designed yourself, use it in your own country. Let's get testimonials of what is happening with that GMO in that country. Then when you have failed or succeeded, let's talk about it then. Otherwise, it's GMOs that we have created for ourselves, using our own scientists, that we should be considering on a first line basis. Mr. Chairman, the National Biosafety Authority is currently very small, unstructured, and I would like to work with this House to ensure that we support it via budgetary allocations and so on, to make sure that that authority is sufficiently funded and properly run to help us with the GMO, because the GMO issue is going to become a big thing globally, and so we must be ready for it. I think I spoke about the fertilizers, but one of the things I didn't talk about is the process of getting it to the farmers. There has been, I know, just as a Kenyan, I know there is an outcry out there that whatever subsidy you give can very easily be offset by the transportation costs of where you are getting it from. And therefore, what I intend to do is working with the county governments, ensure that we use the processes in county governments, we use the processes in, with the cooperative movement, with the circles, to ensure that this can go as close to the people as possible. There would be no reason whatsoever why any farmer, for example, sitting in a county, should come to Nairobi to go and to come for fertilizer. That is something, is a cost that we should bear. Otherwise, we would be giving with one hand and taking the same with the other. And therefore, I'm not going to preside or supervise over an activity such as that one. The other aspect of fertilizer, I think, that has not been raised, and I also want to mention, is the question of accountability. Accountability of the subsidized fertilizers. And that is to say that if we must have proper data in terms of what is a farmer, how much has been allocated to a farmer, how much is going to them. Is it the same quantity or a different quantity? Do we have a situation where I've been allocated 5 bags and I get 3 bags, where another farmer has been allocated 10 bags and get 12 bags? And technology, again, here can help us with the traceability of the fertilizer. We need a platform that can say, as Mutahi Kagwe, I got a message that I can collect 5 bags, but I must also give feedback that I actually received 5 bags. That way, my allocation and what I actually received can be reconciled, and therefore that transparency can kill a lot of the suspicion that is currently within that accountability of the subsidized fertilizers. And yes, extension services, Mheshimiwa Wanyonyi, is a way to go. But I think what I want to clarify is that I do not see the youth as just people who are going to be employed in extension services. I see the youth as the major participants in the activities of farming. You and I and a lot of our age mates, are slowly disappearing. And we need to make sure that our food security is no longer with us. Our food security should be with the young people who are the ones who are getting children and so on. So yes, we are using them as extension people, but we want to mainstream agriculture also to the youth. On the issue of Mheshimiwa Naisula spoke about the budgetary allocations and donor funding for the programs that are going on, particularly in the livestock keeping areas. And I want to say the two things. Number one is that we have got to be the ones driving the donors. We don't want donor-driven projects. Donor-driven projects have got a way of becoming expensive eventually. And you know, Mr. Chairman, this word donor is something that we need to clarify. You will remember, even in the 9th Parliament, we were talking about this definition, donor. Donor is not actually a real donor, as we understand it in the English language. It's a loan. It's actually a bank loan, which is disguised as a donor. So let's make sure that we are talking the right things. These people who come to do the projects in all the areas in agriculture, this is money that will eventually be paid by Kenyans. So we must not take donor-driven ideas. It is our ideas that we should be discussing with the donors. And in the course of that discussion, we must discuss the question of sustainability. What happens when this program is over? Part of the donor fund must be that sustainable aspect, the training of the farmers themselves, the training of the extension people themselves, so that when they are leaving a complete project that is ongoing. And to your question regarding research organizations such as CARO and the others, I think a lot of our research organizations have also been misused. Misused to the extent that we are working with international organizations. They are using our scientists to carry out this research. And what we find, and the discoveries that we make a patent out there by others who then bring the results of the research here for us to buy. I think that it is important for us to put a legal framework within our research organization. And I can tell you this is something I try to introduce at KEMRI, because the same thing was happening with the researchers for health. I think it is also time for us to ensure that the researchers for vet medicines and vet services are also part of that understanding. Yes, we need to work with international organizations, because essentially research is international in its nature. But we must make sure that what we get here and our findings here remain ours. That data, when you see an organization coming to say they want to work with you in research, what they are looking for is data. We must make sure that that data belongs to us. And people can buy from us, not us use our nation, use our scientists to then buy from them.
Thank you. Yes, Ferdinand, ADC Farms.
Yeah, no, I've finished, but I just wanted to request the nominee, in case you are being made Minister for Agriculture, I want you on this extension service so can be able to increase productivity for export and local consumption. Look for budget allocation for training of extension services. Just look for budget for that, because we have talked about...
You are the ones who give money.
No, but they have to go. He has to ask for it.
Yes, Daud.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the nominee, I don't know when you last walked on the streets of Nairobi, but you know when there are goons on the streets who want to pickpocket you or something, I'll say it in Kiswahili, watakwambia, mwizi akiwa amekuiba, atakwambia, angalia ule mwizi ule, na yeye ndio mwizi. So I'm not putting it to you that you are anything like that. But you know, you have just talked about cartels. You were standing outside Afia House and said, the cartels are here. And you did nothing about them. Because you left that and the cartels are still there. Now I'm putting it to you. While you were the Minister for Health, there was a vaccine which was approved, Sputnik. And at that time, there were no vaccines in the country. People were dying. And it was a private farm which was approved by the Medical Association to import the Sputnik vaccine. But your ministry went ahead, while they had already administered those vaccines, some of it, and you canceled the vaccine should not be administered without thinking the investment which was put in by the investor who brought that, and it was a private investment. So how are we sure that once you go to the Ministry of Agriculture, you will not stop any new investor the way you did while you were at the Health Ministry? Secondly, when you're talking about cartels, I'm just talking about cartels for you, Kagwe. The Mira, His Excellency the President, when campaigning in the Kenya Kwanza, he promised the whole of Meru, Embu, and the Mount Kenya East that this government would take care of the Mira farmer and the markets and all that. Unfortunately, we have not gone too far. But are you aware that the Mira farmers who are going to the airport have to pay a levy, which is levied, which there is no receipt for it, there is no nothing, but they have to pay millions of shillings a day. Not one or two, many millions of levy, which even your AFA, which is under the Ministry of Agriculture, says they are aware about it, but they can do nothing about it. So there is a cartel there as well. I'm giving you the facts. Lastly, you have said about the fake fertilizer. The former Minister for Agriculture, Honorable Mithika Linturi, he comes from my county, not from my constituency. He said there was no fake fertilizer. He is on record saying there was no fake fertilizer. If there was fake fertilizer, as you have alluded to, and no people have been taken to court for that fake fertilizer, and nobody has been compensated for that fake fertilizer, is it true there was fake fertilizer or there was no fake fertilizer? And the fertilizer was being distributed by National Cereals and Produce Board, a government agency, not private shops. So what are you going to do about it? Thank you.
Marcel?
Thank you, Chairman. Nominee, you've spoken to the aspect of the how to make agriculture more profitable and how to make it more attractive, and they need to incorporate technology and information and all that. But a number of studies have also indicated that many farmers do not comply to safety practices. Reasons being there is lack of extension officers, there's lack of awareness to existing food safety requirements, and there is also poor enforcement of regulations. So I'm wondering, my question is, how are you going to promote food safety? And we are also aware that Finland spoke about the extension officers. There are no extension officers. I put it to you from the ground, there are no extension officers. Yet we have so many graduates, agricultural graduates, from the TVET, from universities. So how, if you were nominated, your nomination successful, how are you going to create opportunities to absorb more of these agricultural officers? Because there's nobody to train. I presume you have to onboard them, then train. And then now tell us how you're going to promote safety. Secondly, we've spoken about fertilizer. My question is very straight, and I want to give an example of Busia County. Fertilizer depot is in Malaba town. How does this farmer from Busia town or from Budalangi travel to Malaba to collect fertilizer? What are you going to do to make sure that we take it to the closest administrative unit, probably at constituency level, so that the farmer from Butula gets it from there, and it's same to all the others? My last one is on sugarcane. I come from a sugarcane growing area. And I'm aware recently that you are aware that the National Assembly did pass the sugar bill. How, according to you, is it going to be a game changer in the sugar subsector? There are still issues around zoning, issues around pricing. There's a farmer who has just texted me that the price went per ton has gone down from 5,500 to 4,200. So what are you going to do to improve the price of cane so that our farmers can benefit? Thank you.
Sharia.
Thank you, Chairman. Mheshimiwa, there's a growing interest in public-private partnerships. How do you plan to foster PPPs in the agriculture and livestock sector? Thank you.
Meshi.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Chairman, in our country, we have been facing two scenarios. One is recurrent droughts, and second is recurrent flooding. And I'm just asking the nominee, what mitigation measures are you going to put in place to ensure that you intervene on these two scenarios? Because I'm just looking like an area in the coastal region, an area like Tana River, which experience erratic rainfall, prolonged dry spells, and intense flooding. And this scenario, both, they affect crop and livestock sector. So how are you going to mitigate this? Because I'm thinking that during flooding, maybe we can do some measures to ensure that maybe we harvest that water which is caused by the flooding, so that it can be used during the drought. But most of the ministers who have come, they've been talking a lot on how they are going to mitigate on this issue, and yet they have done nothing so far. My second question is just to emphasize on what the Kenya Kwanza government has been talking about in terms of creating employment opportunities. One of the area is in agriculture, and I'm just thinking, I'm looking at how the minister have been doing a lot in terms of coffee, tea, and even sugar sector, whereby they've put a lot of initiative to ensure that they create some jobs and also they boost the economy. What are you going to do in terms of coconut, cashew nut, and also Bixa, in terms of having some local industry in the coast region so that we can have some employment opportunities for the youth? And also, again, on the same breath, and this is my last question, it is the challenges which the farmers on coconut and cashew nut are facing in coast region, especially on pest, disease management, and also planting materials. What are your measures which are going to put in place so that to ensure even coconut, cashew nut, and Bixa can thrive in the coastal region, to ensure that our economy is being boosted and even we have job creation for the youth? Thank you, Honorable Chairman.
Thank you, nominee. Can you answer those four?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me start with the issue of fertilizer. First of all, I want to say that, let me start with Mr. Dawood's question on the issue of the Sputnik. I remember distinctly the issue of Sputnik vaccine that came from Russia. And I can tell you, Honorable Member, through the chair, that there was not a single vaccine that we allowed into Kenya that was not approved, and there was not a single vaccine that we refused to take that was approved. Now, the issue here is who approves it. And our rule within the National Emergency Response Committee on coronavirus, and following the advice that we also got, is that we did not use any vaccines that were not WHO, World Health Organization approved. And I'm aware that at the time that we had stored with Sputnik, the condition that we gave Sputnik is, and the Russian people even came to see us, not even the business people, is to say, please deal with the World Health Organization approval, and as soon as you have got those approvals, we have no problem using the vaccine. Because you can imagine how many, what we'd have to deal with vaccines coming from very many different parts of the world. The only thing that we could do and guarantee the safety of our people was to use the World Health Organization as a major approval organization for us. And at that time,
Point of order, Chair. Yes. Chairman, sorry. the minister, the former minister of health is not telling us the truth. There is no way the vaccine could have come to Kenya if it was not approved. That is the first thing. They had an approval from the Kenya Medical Practitioners Board, and it was even administered. 230,000 doses were administered. But it was politics which made it to go out. It was a private venture. Yes, they had everything, but the minister is not telling us, the former minister is not telling us.
Executive Committee on
approval of the government.
Everything, but the minister is not telling us, the former minister is not telling us the truth.
Are you not telling us the truth? Yes,
Mr. Chairman.
Hold there. Yes, Junet.
Chairman, I agree with the Honorable Dawood. The vaccine arrived in Kenya with the approval of the government, and it was administered to many people, including the current president. And what happened when the current president, who was the deputy president, took it, is when that regime stopped it. Let us be honest to each other. Yeah, let's be honest.
Mr. Chairman.
Did you play politics with the health of Kenyans?
Mr. Chairman, I want to repeat that the only approvals that we recognize as the National Executive Committee on Coronavirus was approvals that came from the World Health Organization.
If that was the case, just hold there. How did the vaccine get into Kenya and have it administered on Kenyans before you chased it away? Yes, including our then deputy president getting a jab of that vaccine.
Mr. Chairman, all I can say is that whether a vaccine has arrived in the country or not, no matter how it has arrived in the country or not, if it has not been approved by the World Health Organization, we cannot use it, and we did not use it. I think I rest my case.
So are you telling us that it had, by the time it arrived and it was administered to 230,000 people, it had not yet received approval from World Health Organization?
Absolutely not. And I think, Mr. Speaker, I do not recall the actual figures that it had been administered to. I cannot remember now what figure, but I don't think it was anywhere near, the kind of figure that you had said. Suffice it to say, Mr. Chairman, that the decision that was made at the time by the National Emergency Response Committee and the Ministry of Health was that we will not, and we would not in the future, use any vaccine that had not been internationally approved by the World Health Organization.
And you are the chairman of that committee?
And I was the chairman.
Yes.
And I take responsibility. And we agreed, Mr. Chairman, we agreed, even at that point, as I remember, we agreed that if the vaccine could get World Health Organization approval, we would use it.
What Dawood has put to you is that you made an irrational decision based on political consideration.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to ask him what Honorable Junet has said. The Deputy President at that time and the President right now, who has nominated you today, is the one who took that jab, is when you stopped the Sputnik. Is that true or not true?
Absolutely not true.
Point of order, Chair. Chair, when that, when we were, Chairman, when we were taking the vaccines,
yes,
there were many vaccines. There was AstraZeneca, there was this one and others.
Pfizer,
Johnson & Johnson. Chairman, we were in the country here. At that time, people were really looking for vaccines to use.
Desperately.
The day the current president, who was then the deputy president, got a jab in the afternoon, in the evening, a press statement came out saying that thing is banned in our country. That's the truth of the matter. That's the truth of the matter.
Mr. Chairman, I cannot recall the events as they followed, if indeed that is the way they followed. But I repeat my position. We could only use a vaccine approved by the World Health Organization.
Go on with the others. I'm sure you know.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, the issue of mitigating circumstances, I think that were raised by Mishi, the issue of what do we do when there are droughts And then there is flooding that happens. I'll come back to the others as well. You know, I agree with her that, Honorable Chairman, that the issue of drought mitigation is critical. And it has been there a long time. We all know about Budalangi, and we know other areas in the coast. And season after season, the discussion is the same. And what I would like to commit myself to, Mr. Chairman, is working with the ministries involved. As you are aware, the Ministry of Irrigation, the Ministry of Water is charged with the dam, the areas of matters to do with the damming. But I also want to involve the county governments in this matter, because the issue of acceptability, for example, the involvement of the county governments with the extension farmers, because in Schedule 4, extension farmers that Honorable Emase raised, extension farmers are actually the job of the county government. My job is to ensure that we fight this fight in terms of training, in terms of budgeting and funding, so that we have got these people. And I would like to refer to the matter that you referred, which you say that this House is the one that allocates budgets, and to say that in spite of that, we can also predicate some of these things on what Honorable Naisura had raised on the issue of donors. This is one of the areas that we could try very hard to work with our funders and with our donors in terms of the extension farmers, so that in mitigating the issues that have been raised, the conditions and challenges that Honorable Michi has raised, ensuring that we have got the proper crops to use during drought, ensuring that we have got the correct livestock to use, ensuring that diseases don't start affecting our livestock just because there was flooding, going on. I think that is a job that will ably be done by extension people. I think they are as crucial as Mheshimiwa Wanyonyi had raised. And I'm going to work very hard with the county governments to ensure that extension farmers, but also working concurrently with the ministries involved in dam building, such as Ministry of Water and Irrigation. And I think that, Mr. Chairman, the other involvement is also the committees of parliament. The committees of parliament on agriculture, the committees of parliament on health, on water and cooperatives. I think sometimes it is also good for us to have discussions together with them. And I propose to also engage them so that we can discuss budgeting and budget allocations also here, together obviously with the budget committee. Mr. Chairman, yes, Honorable Michi spoke about the job, the aspect of job creation in agriculture. And I think that sometimes we also miss opportunities of job creation in agriculture. For example, we are talking about fertilizer subsidies. And we have got companies in this country that can actually make fertilizers. Away from the coast, there are some companies in the coast. And it is true that if we structure the subsidies properly, it is possible that these companies that make fertilizers can be funded or can be part of the subsidy movement so that they too can create jobs. I think whatever we do at whatever time we do it, we need to ensure that any opportunity to create a job is not lost, because part of the challenge we are having with our youth is actually that job aspect of job creation. And I think I alluded to the issue of disease, disease management. Again, research on these issues is going to assist us a lot on disease management. But I think that it is better to use preventive measures, ensuring that the diseases don't occur in the first place, rather than curative measures that we have got to deal with after the event has taken place. On the issue of sugar and the sugar bill, yes, I'm aware that the sugar bill has gone through. And I'm also aware that we produced this year, a large quantity, perhaps the highest quantity, a large quantity of sugar, which actually might save us from importing sugar this year. And I think that is a fantastic development, but it must not be at the cost of the farmer. It cannot be at the cost of the farmer, because I think we should understand that the subsidy to the farmer is not a subsidy to the farmer per se. It is only a subsidy to the farmer directly. It is indirectly a subsidy to the consumer. Because
the
it is
Sugar Act, a nominee is awaiting, if you are approved, to promulgate regulations.
I'm aware of that, Mr. Chairman.
That you are now delving into.
Yes, I'm aware of that, Mr. Chairman. Yes. And that's what I alluded to. And I think that the regulations will be done in the fastest possible time.
That's what we'll deal with, what Mary Masse is talking about. Yes,
Chairman,
Sharia, PPPs.
He's not even answered my cartels and fake fertilizer.
Mr. Chairman, on the issue of the PPP, I'll come back to Mira. On the issue of the PPP, Mr. Chairman, usually the problem is not the private players in the game. Usually, the problem in trying to craft a private-public partnership, in my opinion, lies, the fault lies with the public sector, not the private sector. The private sector has got a number of things that they normally demand if they are going to put their money anywhere. One of them is very quick decisions. They want us to make this decision about their investment quickly. In the past, I think we should own up as government that we have created so much bureaucracy around the issue of PPP that a person starting the PPP process usually at some point just gives up and goes. I think that one of the things, one of the entry points for us is to reduce the bureaucracy as much as we can, particularly in the agricultural sector. There are people who express interests to come and lease land and grow, say, for example, rice. All right? And we put roadblocks to them, and we put so many conditions to them that eventually, by the end of the day, they say, if I go to Rwanda, I'll get free land and start this job tomorrow. And they leave. So we are losing a lot of investments, you know, because of our own bureaucracy and the conditionalities that we are using, that we are putting on the private sector people. Conditions that sometimes are official conditions, and conditions sometimes which are suspect. So I agree with you that we must fight more, we must reduce our bureaucracy, and we must be more willing. It should be an objective to bring the people in. It should be our objective to fight for investments to come in, not to put roadblocks for the investors. On the issue of the cartels, as Honorable Dawood raised, and what you are referring to, I think, Honorable Member, is a criminal issue. It's not a policy issue. You are referring to a criminal activity that is clearly going on someplace. You said at the airport, that is clearly going on at JKIA. And I think this is the only thing we can, you and I, is to bring this thing to the attention of investigators. I will do my part in terms of prosecuting that issue and ensuring that through AFA, through the organizations that are in the Ministry of Agriculture, I will ensure and fight to make sure that we unravel any of those practices that might be going on. But clearly, Mr. Chairman, what we are discussing here is a criminal activity and a criminal gang that is operating at JKIA, and it should be referred, in fact, to the police and investigating arms of the government. And I can tell you that that is not something that we are going to just stand by and watch the Mira farmers, you know, get punished for nothing.
Okay. Yes, Junet?
Mr. Speaker, just still on the issue of sugar. Honorable nominee, you can see there's a problem in the sugar industry. And stories after stories have been happening for many years, how the sugar sector will be revived. But there's a program the government has started, and they have done well now, I can see in Mumias, the leasing program, and it is bearing, results. What are your thoughts on that? Because I come from a sugar growing area. I want to see what your I want to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the Honorable Junet that part of the problem, obviously in the sugar industry, I'm speaking very quickly on these issues, because as you can see the time aspect.
Your time is up, actually.
Yes, absolutely. I want to say, Mr. Chairman, that the issue that we want to address, and it is good that the Chairman has pointed out that the bill, is just waiting for the aggression, increasing efficiency or production is part of the solutions that Honorable Emase was raising. Because if you increase efficiency and you reduce the cost of production, then automatically that wastage that was happening within that structure would go to the farmer. It goes without saying. And it is clear, you know, anybody who has been following that sugar sector issue is clear. With the kind of debt write-offs that we have done as a government, it means that you can reduce that burden a little bit. If we then get licensees, you know, these people who want to work with, who want to partner, the disease, who want to work, who want to work with the sugar sector, whether it is, especially the government-owned mills, if they want to come to us and the farmers are in agreement, and the caucus within this parliament is in agreement that that's the way to go in order for us to create efficiency in the sugar sector, by all means, that's what we should do.
Thank you, Honorable
Dawood,
Speaker.
you've had more than your fair share.
Yeah.
Which one now?
Mukami?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, let me first declare that I'm the county MP of the nominee. Honorable Speaker, we have a very serious problem in the pyrethrum sector. Right now, I've received a message from a farmer. They are saying for the last 3 months, they have not received the money after delivering the pyrethrum, and yet, even the workers have not been paid for 2 months. So, Waziri, I would like to hear what you are going to do about that and the measures you are going to take to make sure that we avoid such delays. The other thing is about the dairy farmers. How will you institute reforms in the dairy, tea, and coffee sectors to boost productivity? Thank you.
Thank you. Russell?
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Mutahi, the objective of the national livestock vaccination is to strengthen disease control and surveillance to create a disease-free zone in Kenya, for Kenya to access international markets and expand the livestock export market. If we go by what you said, that a farmer can be given choice whether to vaccinate his cow or goat, then we are unlikely to achieve this objective. Are you likely to stand by what you have said, or you are likely to change your mind if the House approves your nomination? Secondly, it is on food security.
Thank you, Raz. I was going to ask him the same question.
On food security, I really want to hear from you. 20% of Kenya is the only arable land available for food production. And 80% is ASAL, arid and semi-arid land. This is a debate since independence. And you could be the 20th or the 30th Minister for Agriculture. If the House approves your nomination, I want to repeat that again. What is it that you are likely to do? Because food is expensive today in Kenya. Production of it is expensive. And more importantly, it's because of the scale of production that is low. So in a sense, food must be expensive. As the nominee for the Ministry of Agriculture, what is it that you are likely to do so that we expand the envelope of agriculture food production? And at the same time, what is it that you are likely to do so that there is incentive for farmers to actually feel that, yes, I can produce more maize, I can produce more potatoes? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Mule.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My concern is what he began with, that is the marketing. And I want to put it clear to you that the country faces challenges in marketing, leakages, and distribution of produce, especially from the local farmers and small farmers, to brokers who take advantage of the fragmented distribution chain to enrich themselves. What do you intend to do to improve the domestic market links and information systems within the market. And last, Mr. Speaker, your predecessor sat there, and I asked him about the tea issue in Mombasa. And he promised that committee, once he's approved, he'll deal with the issue within weeks. Up to today, maybe that's why he has been deployed to be an ambassador. Up to today, we are still talking about issues of tea stack in Mombasa. And when Mwanainji, Wanjiku, Kinuthia, who is planting tomatoes, yet we still have influx of products from the neighboring countries within. And yet they are, the cost of those products at the market are cheaper than the Kenyan produced products. And this is across board. That is tomatoes, cabbage, maize, onions, and everything. And you need to spur that growth of productivity at that level. What are you going to do if you're approved by the House? And putting in mind, we were given a promise by your predecessor a month or so, nothing has happened. 2 years down the line.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want first to start with admitting that the pyrethrum sector that Honorable Mokami referred to is in a mess. I would, to put it any other way, would be to do the proverbial ostrich, thing and bury my head to the ground. And the only thing I can say is, broadly speaking, it is an area I intend to sit with the industry itself, the entire industry, and unravel whatever has been bedeviling it since almost independence. Since the Americans got out who are buying this pyrethrum of ours, we have never quite recovered in the pyrethrum sector. And all I can say is that I will need time to sit with them so that we can resolve whatever issues exist with them. I do not have the silver bullet with me right now. The second thing is on the issue of dairy farmers. I think I spoke at length about the industry to the extent, and I think it's the Honorable Junet who raised it, that I have to work with the marketing agencies, particularly the cooperative ministry, in order for us to streamline. But for me, there are a couple of things that we can do anyway in agriculture. The first thing is that I said, and to begin with, and perhaps that is what I'll eventually end with, that we have to put money in the farmer's pocket. For example, and I'm referring to coffee because you have raised it, not because, and I grew up there, so I know a little bit more about it. Coffee, for instance, was biggest challenge has always been the gap between the farmer and the market. The fact that you grow coffee and give it to somebody, you have no idea how much you have sold it at. You have no idea who is going to process it. You have no idea where it is going. And sometime in the future, you expect to be paid. There is no such business case that can exist anywhere, whether in farming or in any other areas. And I think that closing that gap, and I hope that the coffee bill also being proposed, is that closing the gap between whether it's in sugar, knows a little bit about the market. And I'm glad, Mr. Chairman, that you have a group industry. The second thing is on the issue of dairy farmers. I think I spoke at length about the industry to the extent, and I think it's the Honorable Junet who raised it, that I have to work with the marketing agencies, particularly the cooperative ministry, in order for us to streamline. But for me, there are a couple of things that we can do anyway in agriculture. The first thing is that I said, and to begin with, and perhaps that is what I'll eventually end with, that we have to put money in the farmer's pocket. For example, and I'm referring to coffee because you have raised it, not because, and I grew up there, so I know a little bit more about it. Coffee, for instance, was biggest challenge has always been the gap between the farmer and the market. The fact that you grow coffee and give it to somebody, you have no idea how much you have sold it at. You have no idea who is going to process it. You have no idea where it is going. And sometime in the future, you expect to be paid. There is no such business case that can exist anywhere, whether in farming or in any other areas. And I think that closing that gap, and I hope that the coffee bill also being proposed, is that closing the gap between whether it's in sugar, knows a little bit about the market. And I'm glad, Mr. Chairman, because under the current structure, at least my understanding as I speak today, is that cooperatives are also getting broking licenses. And as you know, that went to the CMA. They are the ones who are approving that structure, so that the cooperatives themselves can also form part of the marketing team. Private sector does that. If you go and see Sasini tea or Sasini milk, Sasini coffee in the supermarkets, it's actually processed by the grower of Sasini. So it is something that we must face in order for it. But the other thing is the productivity per acre. You know, the aspect of to protect his livestock. And I commit myself to that.
That's not what you said earlier.
I said, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman,
Nominee, earlier you said, I will turn up with my vaccine. Do I vaccinate your cow? You say, no, I leave you and move on. And remember,
can I explain?
Just hold on. Just hold on. You are here to answer questions. Yes. You turn up with your vaccine. The farmer says, I'm not interested. You leave the cow and go to the next. Now, the cow you have left behind is bearing a disease that will infect the one that you have vaccinated next door. So is that how you want to run the ministry, or you have vacated that position?
Mr. Chairman, I have not vacated that position. Let me explain. Don't take it too literally. I think that is the problem.
That's what you say.
What I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, is this. I said, and I repeat, nobody is going to be forced. You cannot go and force a farmer with a gun or whatever it is to go there and tell a farmer, you must absolutely vaccinate this cow, or else I'm going to take you to a police station. That is not the way to approach the issue. The choice that I have created, Mr. Chairman, is a choice where you are saying, listen, there is no force of vaccinating your cow. However, if you don't want us to vaccinate it, we can leave it. However, these are the problems that you are going to incur. And that is why I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, nobody with the proper communication is going to make that choice. What you cannot do is go there at gunpoint and tell somebody. You can imagine the kind of fighting you might have with some people, with pangas and so on, if you try that system. So all I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, and don't take it too literally, is that we will give people a choice, but we'll make sure that they make the right decision.
Mule, the last one from Mule.
I'd ask.
Products from our neighbors.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman. Yes, on the issue of the East African situation, it's a challenging one, Mheshimiwa Mule, because we have got the East African Protocol, which has given us certain conditions. We have got the COMESA Protocol, which has also given certain conditions. And the only way for us to work on this issue is to make sure that our cost structure is not as high as it is. In other words, if we are putting this, and perhaps what the government has started in terms of subsidizing fertilizers and subsidizing other farm inputs, can assist us in bringing down our cost of production so that our people, the prices of our goods are not, do not exceed those ones of Uganda and Tanzania. We have got quotas. And I think there's a discussion between the East African countries that has got to be done, because don't forget that even as we complain about what they are bringing in, they too are complaining about what we are taking there and the balance of payment issues between the East African nations. So I think eventually it will come to an equilibrium, but I think on our part, on my part, my role and my job is to try and make sure to mitigate the circumstances so that we are producing at an affordable rate where we can both make money for the farmer, but also make sure that the consumer is not advancing for the importation of others because they are cheaper than their own products. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. A few questions from the public.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
He didn't answer the second part of my question.
Which is?
On the issue of ASAL.
The ASALs.
Yes.
I think I'd spoken a little bit about that issue of food security and the issue of ASAL region. But let me just quickly wrap what I had said. I had said that we need a huge infusion of our research organizations in those areas, particularly the arid and semi-arid areas, because the farming in the area we have got to bring products that are conducive to the climate. The climate won't change. So it is our climate, it is our products that must change to suit the climate. If it is the question of damming, and I said earlier that I would work with the Ministry of Irrigation, the Ministry of Water and Irrigation, to ensure that we are doing more dams than we are. Some county governments have done a fantastic job in terms of creating water ponds, for example, that can be used both for crop as well as livestock support. But I think there is more to be done, and I think that I will work with the county governments that are in place and see where the support that we can give in terms of creating these disease-resistant crops, drought-resistant crops. And I think I'd spoken to that issue a little bit earlier. And you are right. If we don't address, the semi-arid area has to be in the future the main farming area because it is a larger part of Kenya. But we also have seen countries in the world that are within very dry areas making huge production. I mean, Egypt, we have got Israel, we have got countries around us that we can copy. Australia and so on. So we can do it. It's a question of the political will and the time to do it.
Thank you. Mishi?
Mr. Speaker.
Mishi's question about the planned crops of the coasts.
Yeah,
Coconut, Bixa. Did you answer that?
And Chair, also
Chairman,
yes.
Just on the same breath, there is one section of farmers which you have not addressed, and I want to talk about it, to ask the question on the horticultural farming. There is this question, and it is some challenges, especially the stringent international standard which they are facing. The other one is the Ethiopian's fledgling cut flower industry. So how are you going to intervene so that you ensure that our farmers doing horticultural also can benefit from this?
Chair, if we can respond to the issue of the bulk tea at the port of Mombasa. I know it is a serious issue whereby it is holding serious economic background to this country. And we really need very clear directive from him when he takes off the ministry. Because last time we were given 2 months to handle it. It's still there. And farmers are suffering.
Nominee?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My understanding, Mheshimiwa, is that, and this is something that I had consulted even with my predecessor on the matter, is that the Munyi-led team has done a substantial amount of work in terms of reducing the quantity that was there lying at the port. I understand there was almost 100,000 metric tons, and right now they are probably talking about some 20 to 30 remaining. That's my understanding from where I sit. So because of the changes that they made in terms of the fixing or the removal of the fixing of the prices, I think the situation is easing away. But this is something I can only talk about from what I have been informed. This is something I need to be there to see. But I'm aware of it. I am aware. I have been looking privately on my own about what is going on in there. I happen to know the committee people as well. So I'll make sure that I get involved as much as I can. I do not wish to give a week or two because I don't know the intricacies of the issue. But I can guarantee you that I'm going to get into the thick of it as quickly as I can. On the issue of horticultural farming and stringent international standards, yes, it is true that we are facing stringent international standards, but I think the horticultural sector is faced with both local and international hostilities that we can deal with. For example, the exports, on the export side, that's one of the areas that I know they have been complaining about. It has been there, is common knowledge in the newspapers, talking about the many small taxes and deductions and all these things that they have to do. And that's what I refer to as supporting. We need to support them, remove some of those things, export more, and then you can tax on the income taxes, and you recover your money through the volumes, not through the initial prohibitive taxes. And of course, on the issue of the international trading space, within the World Trade Organization and other organizations, I think that working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and of course trade is a question of ensuring that the conditions that we are getting from particularly the European Union, because that is where most of these products are going, and also diversifying our market so that we don't depend only on Europe. I think there are various other markets that we have not critically looked at that we can, to make sure that we become competitive. Part of the reason why our competitors can fix us and give us stringent measures is because they know you don't have a choice. But when they know that you have a choice and you can deny them those beans, they will listen to what you are saying.
Yes, thank you. Europe has now given us quota-free, duty-free.
Yeah.
So it's now for you, if you are approved, to ensure that standards are maintained.
Thank you, sir.
Some Kenyan has sent this question. How do you plan to promote and expand feedlot farming in Kenya as a strategy to improve animal productivity? Another one. How do you plan to address productivity limitations, enhance Kenya's food security, and prepare the agricultural sector to meet the rising demand for diverse food products, such as fish, dairy, and meat? And the last one is, you've not told the House what you have ever given back to Kenya as a Kenyan.
Thank you, sir. I think I'll start with the last one to say that, Mr. Chairman, as an elected member of Parliament and as a parliamentarian in public service, all you do, and I'm sure the honorable members around me will agree, is give and give and give. I think that is something that we can all agree in this house. Every single day. You are giving back every single day of your life when you work for the public, and you do so legitimately and honestly. All you are doing is giving back to the community. And I do give back, and I think I have something to give back. And it is the public also that has created us, has created me, through the education, through the jobs I have had. It is the public. So we do need to give back, but I put it to the questioner that we do it every single day. Mr. Chairman, on the issue of promoting the feedlot, to the question that the honorable member had asked about the dry areas. Mm-hmm. The feedlot is one of the key solutions to that issue, because syrages, hay storages, these are some of the measures that we have to be able to take in order for us to have that storage, warehousing those things, so that during a dry season, we have got at least some measure of mitigation before the rains come again. And as I said, this is something that we need to work with the county governments. Even as we talk about food security for the human beings, we also ought to talk about food security for livestock, because livestock is also part of food security. So if we had that issue of feedlot, and we say to ourselves as county governments, backed by the national government, that anytime there is, like now, when the hay is available all over the country, let's make sure that we stock up enough for a rainy day, even as we stock up, for the people who own the livestock. Because sometimes their livelihoods depend are the same. On the issue of diverse food products, yes, I agree that it is time to look at even going back to some traditional crops like sorghum that we used to grow, millet that we used to have. But this is happening almost automatically because the current consumer is also becoming very aware and health conscious. So that 10 years ago, there was very little demand for millet and soya and so on. Today, that is something that is growing, and if you go to the supermarkets, it's happening. But we must also remember that urbanization and lifestyle changes are also going to create different demands that have not been there. For example, rice, the demand for rice is the fastest growing in the country. Why? Because of lifestyles, because people in urban areas can cook rice a lot faster, that they can cook other foodstuffs. So we have got to adjust the farming issues in a holistic way. We have got to look at farming holistically, relating it to changing lifestyles and changing needs and consumer behavior in the country.
Thank you. We're coming to an end of your engagement with you. There is a long affidavit sent by Mr. Ura. Members have had the opportunity to look because we shared that with the nominee. I've had an opportunity to look at your response, and I find the same substantially satisfactory. I'll now ask you a few mundane questions. What is your net worth in terms of wealth?
Mr. Chairman, my net worth currently would be around 800, I want to get the exact figure, 800 and, about 842 million shillings.
Made of?
Made up of essentially my wealth is in assets, is in real estate, is in pieces of land here and there accumulated over many years.
Have you ever been convicted?
No, sir, I have never been
Of
convicted.
a criminal offense in a court of law?
No, sir, not once.
Have you ever been adversely mentioned in a parliamentary committee?
No, sir, not to my knowledge.
Do you hold an office in a political party?
No, I do not.
Have you ever been dismissed from office or removed from office on account of contravention of Article 75 of the Constitution?
No, sir.
Have you ever been associated with practices that depict bias, favoritism, tribalism, nepotism in the discharge of public duty?
No, sir.
I'll now give you 2 minutes to make your concluding remarks to this committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I wish to take this opportunity to thank the committee for a very engaging debate on this matter. And I want to assure the committee that going forward, I look forward to working with you, collaborating with you in this House, because half of the work that we are going to do, or a fair percentage of the work that we do, is collaborating with the members of the National Assembly and members of the Senate. I want to assure you that some of the issues that we have raised are issues that we are going to look at, we are going to study, we are going to execute. I have no intentions of wasting 2 years. That is a period that I have, and I will do my utmost, not only to set the ministry on the right path, but also to address some of the challenges that have been bedeviling the ministry over a long period of time. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence.
Thank you very much. Unless you are lawfully held, you are now released to go to your other duties.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The originals of your documents, make sure you go back with them. Thank you. Have a good day. Members, it's now 2:35. I'll give you a lunch break of 30 minutes. So be back here at 3:05. Pardon? 3:10, an extra 5 minutes. And lunch is available even to our members of the Fourth Estate.